Hey there, skeptics. Get ready for a wild story from Port Coquitlam, Canada. A bizarre sign showed up at a stop sign. Actually, not a really stop sign, but a bus stop. And it's causing quite a stir. The sign promotes a whites only moms and tops group. Yes, seriously. It suggests kids can play with others who look like them and escape forced diversity. After the tweet went viral, the city condemned it, but social media reactions were all over the place. Some defend the event, others are outraged, and some question the city's reaction if it targeted people of color. It's a mess and a mix of opinions. But here's the kicker: the drama doesn't hold a candle to the beliefs of another group, a Asa True folk assembly. Stay tuned for more on this wild ride. This story is from distractify.com, published on September 26, 2023. So, fellas, let's go ahead and talk about Port Coquitlam. I practiced that. And Infidel, you want to go ahead and kick us off?
There was a time when things like this were becoming actually less acceptable to say.
Mm.
I'm uncertain whether to despair at such regression or to be glad that people make it easy to know who holds such contemptible views. But this exposure does expose a very real problem. Overt racism is on the rise.
Yeah.
And to some, diversity is a buzzword for danger, something to be held in contempt. Homogeny is their goal. You know, what we what they don't understand is diversity brings new perspective.
Mm.
Exposure to new cultures, values, and beliefs that don't mirror your own is an important experience for growth, not only as individuals, but for a community as whole. It's important. Now, there will always be differences between individuals, and at times there'll be disagreements and even conflict, but the alternative is just stagnation. Now, the folk assembly that you mentioned, they were new to me. But
Mm.
doing a little research on them, I recall running across another group that they're tied in with, the Odinists, and they pretty much have the same viewpoints. They support all sorts of detestable things that one would expect of Christian identity movement, only with old European gods instead of a white Jesus.
Mm.
Now, Canada and the United States, they're both becoming more diverse populations, and I do think that is one of the things that's causing this fear of change that we're seeing as a driving force here. These people are blinded by a desire to return to a time that they look back with nostalgia. The reality is that no one's going to talk anyone out of prejudiceness. You can't be forced to learn or give up your preconceived ideas. Ultimately, people are going to move forward into a future where diversity is embraced, or they're going to huddle in fear of the changing world around them. Now, I have to look at this sickening sign as just something temporary regression. Because for me, it's with shame and disgust that I recall I've seen and laughed at even worse than this sign. But if I can grow from a neo-Nazi Duke supporting delegate, having attended a wedding where a groom wore a Nazi uniform and bragged about a triple cross burning he attended the week before, if I can go from there to where I am now, I have to remain hopeful that these people can too. Now, truth is, I almost felt like I should just read out their sign for 2 or 3 minutes, because there's not much I could say that would make them look worse than that. They
Mm.
pretty much did it themselves. Now Scott, I know I
Hmm.
have a somewhat limited view here coming from my background, and I was very curious to how you felt about it.
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to learn that Infidel 64 parties with some hardcore people. So I'll keep that in mind. But you were saying, yeah, you were worried about how we're regressing here, about how, is this a sign of regression? Um, and yeah, that's totally the case. I mean, I remember when I was a kid watching old Happy Days reruns, and it was edgy to have an episode where there was a, whites only this, or, so on, colored people go over here kind of thing. It seems like, hasn't this played out already? You know, how is it that we can see this? But there was an interesting twist on this story, I think, and that is that usually, like, you know, some of the segments we did earlier this week, we've been talking about cut and dry legal, you know, wrongdoing. You know, this is constitutional. This is not. You know, very very straightforward. In this case, though, I think the legality is a little bit hazy. So we have this group that's advertising for whites only moms and tots. Okay. And we know that in the U.S. at least, or I know in the U.S. at least, that organizations that are offering services to the public, and I might be you know, might not get the legal terminology exactly right here, but you know, if an organization is offering services to the public, they're restricted from discriminating on the basis of race and several other categories. But that's not the case for private gatherings or social groups or things like that. And so, and I'm not familiar with how it is in Canada, but I'm assuming that it's fairly similar, if not even more progressive. Generally, Canada is a little bit more progressive than the US, although not in all cases. But since this group has been allowed to at least advertise at a public bus stop, I'm assuming that they fall under, you know, the social group kind of aspect, not the other group. But who knows? You know, assuming that's the case, then the group is basically calling themselves out for being bigots. It's, you know, they're pointing at themselves and they're saying, "Hey, come look at us." Bigot alert, bigot alert. And so, but it's not, but see, it's an interesting take on it, because the legality of it is not necessarily so cut and dry, but the moral case is very cut and dry. And it's amazing that they're not only that we're still talking about this kind of thing, but that if there's people out there that are proclaiming it. That was the headline of, you know, that was the big headline of their poster. And you know, morally, we definitely have, I mean, clearly there's this is a harmful thing. There's you know, several different ways that we're seeing harm from this type of segregation, is that they're depriving their children. The moms in this group are depriving the tots of the wonderful opportunities that come up when you're exposed to people that are different than you. You know, that's one of the best ways to learn things, is to see things that you don't already believe or that you don't already know. You know, exposed to new experiences. Secondly, they're depriving themselves as parents by limiting their exposure to other families. Okay, and so again, that helps maintain that, you know, those fences of bigotry and division, right? The us versus them mentality. They're also depriving their family group, or what, you know, the moms and the moms groups. Okay, they're depriving that group of exposure to other people. Okay, new people come in that are different than you, can maybe show you better ways of doing this, or whatever. You know, evolution, economics. You know, you always hear, don't put all of your eggs in one basket, or diversify that portfolio, and that's because it creates a stronger group. It creates, you know, it's not a bunch of identical people with all the same skills and all the same preferences and all the same predilections. They're different people with different ideas. And so then you can pick and choose from the best, and you can set aside the old, well, we would think you could set aside the old tired ideas. But the way that the most impact that they're having as far as harm is concerned is on society as a whole, because what they're saying is, hey, it's okay to act like this. It's okay to be a dick here. You know, it's okay to be a bigot. And that's not the case. I mean, we see time and time again, we see that these, you know, bigotry just puts up those fences, it reinforces itself, and it just breaks us down and makes us weaker. Kelley, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I know you're right. You're right about bigotry. I don't know what the laws are in Canada. It's just like you. I didn't do a deep dive into the laws in Canada because I knew that was going to be a really deep dive. So what I did do is I started looking into Asatru, and it's actually a very popular religion in Iceland. But real Asatru is not the same as the Asatru Folk Assembly here in the United States. They've co-opted this religion, much like the Christian nationalists have co-opted Christianity and turned it to their bigoted white supremacist ideals. And so I want to make sure that people understand that you don't just get down on somebody because they follow Asatru. That's just the belief in the old Norse gods. So but this Asatru Folk Assembly has really changed it. They're even worse than the Christian nationalists. They started in 1969 with the name of the Viking Brotherhood. Now, is it just me, or does, like, when an organization has the word brotherhood in its name, it seems to me it's like a dog whistle buzzword?
Yeah, I get triggered. I get triggered real hard. Yep.
Yeah, right. So anyway, they eventually changed their name to the Asatru Folk Assembly. They now have 24 chapters across the United States. They actually got a permit to have a whites-only church. So, I mean, this is something that they're on the move and marching across America. So we do have to stand up to these kind of things if we don't want to see this kind of bigotry. And as Infidel mentioned, that racism's on the rise in the USA. It's considered accepted right now. Many political leaders are out there using the same dog whistles that this church is using, and they're making it acceptable to be a bigot. And I'm hoping that this is hopefully the lashing out of a cornered, dying animal, because the ideals that they're spreading need to be put to rest by a society eager to embrace a better future for everyone. And I'm hoping that maybe that's the path we can take and be warned by people like this. Cynthia, what do you have to say?
Well, Kelley, the problem is, and when I said I sound like Infidel. The problem is that unfortunately, we have a group of people that won't let this idea die.
Mm-hmm.
That there are definitely people that want to continuously espouse, push, and continuously give the defibrillator to racism, bigotry, and all things shitty when it comes to this particular rhetoric.
I think it's mostly because they need somebody to blame their own inadequacies on.
Yep.
Yeah, and also it's still like pushing, because like unfortunately we have seen in the news on more than one occasion, particular news outlets and also other people using this whole idea of the great replacement theory to be very much so alive, and like the immigrants are coming from your jobs, the black people are coming for your wives, and hide your kids, hide your wife, they coming for everybody, just and just all this ridiculousness that just comes from not engaging in being able to rise above your cognitive biases. I know that all of us have them. But the difference when you are saying that you are a person that values skepticism and critical thinking is that you realize that you have cognitive biases, and you take the time to learn not only what your biases are, but why they are wrong. And unfortunately, this Moms for Tots groups and the Asatru Folk Assembly have not done that. They have doubled and tripled down on why they need to be more insular and why they need to balk against anything that has to do with diversity, anything that has to do with inclusion, anything that has to do with, actually saying that, hey, there's other other people other than white people that exist in the world. And guess what? Not all of us are bad. I know that that's a shocker. It's a shocker, y'all.
Really?
Yeah, it is. It's a shocker. Oh. I'm saying, but no, not all of us are bad. I'm just saying. But you guys actually went through the story pretty well. I applaud you. Thank you. You make mama proud. But one of the things that I actually mentioned in the intro is the things that people are saying on the dumpster fire that is known as X, formerly known as Twitter. I wanted to read a couple of tweets to you if you give me a
All
little
right,
room
let's hear it.
to do that. Okay. And guys, read the story. It has actually, some of the tweets that I'm reading on it now. First one, I would like the city to explain what is hateful about identitarian social gatherings. Yeah, what's wrong? They just all
That was
identify
a
as
new
white.
word for me.
Yeah,
Identitarian.
right. Identitarian. That's,
Okay.
I had to say it slow so that I can get my hooked on phonics work for me out.
All right. All
Yeah,
right.
that's important. Sound it out.
Make it
Remember
work.
back in the
Make it work.
day? Yeah, sound it out. That's how you learn words. Here's another one, guys. White people should not be forced to interact with non-whites until non-whites lower their crime rates. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's the whole crime, dog whistle. And to be honest with you, I can do a whole show just on that tweet alone and why it's fallacious. But let's move on. Here's another one. There's lots of black only groups, Asian groups, etc. The way they phrased this was reminiscent of segregation. But if they had some mom and tots European group or something similar, it wouldn't be any different than private groups for black families. And that's the tweet that I really want to focus on because honey, there is a difference between even saying that moms for tots for European groups or something similar is just like saying, private groups for black families or Asian families or Hispanic families or the like, right? And I wanted to just bring us back as we were talking about earlier concerning history in the Americas. Now, what they get wrong about this commentary, saying that moms and tots European group is not the same, is not the same as non-whites who have groups. The groups that are non-white did not form because they wanted homogenous groups to themselves. When you look at Western civilizations like the United States and even Canada, they formed because segregation was real and practices and they were practiced actually in both countries. Canada was not immune to segregation, to racism, and also systemic racism. Since all of us on the panel are very aware of Jim Crow and Black codes and the Indian Removal Act and also the Chinese Exclusion Act, like the United States, racial segregation in Canada applied to all non-whites and was historically enforced through laws, court decisions, and social norms with a closed immigration system that barred virtually all non-whites from immigrating until 1962. And several provinces, including Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia, had segregated schools. It was not until the passing of the 1977, the year I was born, Canadian Human Rights Act that these practices began to change. And the last segregated school in Canada closed in 1983. That's the year when the Thriller
Of course. Of course.
when Thriller, actually the short film premiered
Okay,
on
now that you've
MTV.
provided the context, now I
Yeah.
can.
Well,
I
that's
can,
important because
yeah.
everything's go back to Michael. But just outside Halifax in Lincolnville, Nova Scotia, this was a thing. And I also wanted to find a way to kind of like frame my thoughts as far as like why even though like I don't particularly care for the term people of color, I usually just use non-white, but why non-whites actually need spaces where they're actually away from whites. And as much as I love you, Infidel and Scott and Kelley, I love you guys to life. And I look forward to the day that all of us can gather in Austin and drink plenty of beer. I would even drink beer with you, even though I can't stand the stuff, because I love you a
Such
lot. But
sacrifices.
man, the love
That's
is real.
commitment. That's
The love
commitment. Yeah.
is
Yeah.
real.
You've touched me. You've
Yeah,
touched me.
as I should have,
Yeah.
but not in a creepy way. But
Abort. Abort.
yeah, we're moving on. But I did pull an article from arrowjournal.org called "Why People of Color Need Spaces Without White People." And I wanted to actually have this additional voice to add why these spaces were not only created, but why they are still necessary. So, just in summary, the author actually discusses the need for POC to have their own spaces where they can gather without the influence of white cultural dominance and judgment. So it's not necessarily like, oh, we don't like white people, you can't come in here. No, it's not. It's not even really about white people. It's about actually white supremacy and judgment and dominance. And these spaces are seen as essentially for healing, the self-discovering, and empowerment. And the author actually emphasized
Sort of like the ACA.
sort of like the ACA, sort of like the ACA, a healing environment, a place where people who happen to think like us, who are irreligious, who are atheist agnostic, can gather and be able to express our particular thought patterns when it comes to this particular ideology. And what these spaces do is you actually get empowerment and self-discovery. And the author even emphasizes valuing and protecting these spaces as crucial for resisting oppression. And the article even addresses common questions and misconceptions about POC spaces, including concerns about segregation, like some of the tweeters actually mentioned previously. It argues that these spaces are not forms of oppression, but responses to it, providing a temporary respite from racism and white dominance. And the author also challenges the notion that inclusiveness can be cultivated in integrated spaces and explains that the presence of non-whites doesn't automatically make a space inclusive. Okay. And one of the things that I would even say, even was like doing my atheist activism, also working with the Black non-believers, even though like this particular, our particular organization works with white organizations, have allied with white organizations. But the thing about it is that it actually emphasizes and it actually brings platform to Black voices, because white dominance and because white supremacy and because ideologies like moms for tots is still very real in our society. And non-whites need a safe place to be themselves. It is not an assault.
Here, here.
Yeah, it's not an assault on any person who happens to be different from you or for any of us. It has everything to do with being able to create a safe space so that we can be able to thrive, we can be able to be empowered, and we can be able to have healing. Because as we can all mention that I believe everybody on this particular panel was an ex-Christian, some of us more deeper than the other. Okay. And we, in some cases, I know that I am. I'm not going to say that I'm going to speak for all of you, but I know that I am still in the process of actually deconstructing what that experience was like. Okay. And I'm grateful for the ACA for being able to provide a space where we can actually talk about these particular things, especially like on the, the ACA Discord as well. But, but there's an intersectionality for non-whites that we also have to deal with, white dominance plus dealing with our non-belief. That is a double whammy. And my goodness, don't even add LGBTQIA plus on that too. Come on. It's important to have
triple whammy.
Triple whammy. Exactly, yeah. Scott. Exactly. And so, if we had a thing about I would say, like, a if they want to highlight a reason for them to gather, like they're all moms. Okay. And me being a new mother ish, I'm always looking at parents and asking for advice, because I'm always asking my child, what the hell are you doing now? Okay. And especially
Because parents never have advice for other new parents. Nobody
never,
ever said, nobody ever wants to share their experience.
never.
I've been
Exactly.
on both sides of that conversation many, many
Hello.
times.
Hello. But one of the things that I just want to say specifically about that particular article is that um it does actually call for support for these particular spaces as a means of subverting white cultural conditioning and fostering genuine inclusivity. And it invites readers to become accomplices in this effort and highlights the significance of these spaces for the collection, liberation of all of our societies. So, as much as we want non white spaces to thrive, we want atheist spaces to thrive. And if
Exactly.
you want our space to thrive, dear listener and viewer, click here.